My name is Jensen. Let's learn some Microsoft Power Automate desktop. Today we will work with files and folders. We will see a lot of operations that you can use in your daily automation life. And I'm an RPA developer by profession. That will mean that I will not only bring you all the cool tips and tricks about files and folders, but I will also show you the best practices around it. So let's get started. Log into your Power Automate and then click Create. We will choose the UI flow, click the Power Automate desktop and click Next. We will give our flow a name. So here I can say Files and Folders, and then we will click Launch App. Open Power Automate desktop, and we will wait a few seconds. The Flow Manager is the first thing that will open up. That's this one here. You can see our flow. And then to edit the flow, we will have to wait a few more seconds. Here. So here we can design our flow. We have the actions out here to the left and the canvas here and our variables to the right. So the actions that we will be using today is the file actions and the folder actions. So let me present the case. The case is that I have here on my desktop a lot of files. I have some Excel files, I have some PowerPoint files and some text files. And as you can see, this is a mess. We want to clean up here. So let's see how we can do that with Power Automate. Go back to our Flow Designer, and the first thing that we will do is to get the files on the desktop to a list so we can work with them and inspect them. So choose the Get Files in folder and drag them out here. The folder, well, we can just click the folder icon here and then we can choose the desktop because the files, they are on my desktop. So click OK. Then we'll just click Save. And now you can see that we store them into a files variable. The flow variable is over here. That means that we have created that variable here in our flow, and we can open up the action again. And then we can see that the variable is produced and go down here and we can see that it's called files. We can even rename it if we want. Just make sure you keep the percentages as they are. I'll just be retaining this files. So then we will need to display this list. This will only create a list with the files on my desktop. So now we want to display them. So search for display in our actions, display message, and drag it in. What this does is it will just create a pop-up with the list that we specify. So message box title, that is my files on desktop. Message to display. Well, we want to use the list that we just created up here. So click the function here, and now we can see that we can use our list of files. So double click this files here, and you can see that it automatically will go in here. That's quite clever, isn't it? We will just click Save. Now we can run our flow. So click Run. The flow will run, and here we have a list. We can see that we have some Excel documents, we have some text files, some PowerPoints, and we also have a desktop ini. We don't want to use this one. We especially not want to move it. So we need to make a workaround so we only have the files that we want to move. So let's click OK here. The smart thing that we can do is to open up the Get Files in folder again. So open that up, and here we can see a filter. This filter will just specify what files we will choose to our list. Right now there's an asterisk. That means that we will take all files on our desktop. So what we can do here is that instead of just take all, we can say we'll have the asterisk dot and then txt. This means that we will have all documents ending with txt, that's notepad files, and we don't care about the title, so we will have an asterisk, meaning that we will take all titles here. We could also choose to include subfolders. However, let's not do that. And then we can click Save. Now let's try to run it again. Like this. Now you can see that we only have our text files in our list. That's quite clever. Another thing, that's the best practice that we want to change, is that we hard-coded in the path to our desktop. We can change that. We can open up the Get Files in folder again. So let me copy this address here and click Cancel. Because right now, let's say that this location changes, like the files got moved, then we have to update it in the Get Files in folder here. A smart thing, especially if we will use this path a lot in our workflow, is to create a variable with the value. Let's see how that is done and why it's clever. So go over here to Input Output Variables. Click the plus sign and then click Input. The variable name, well, let's call it files path so we can identify it. That's always a good practice to name your variables as something that you can easily use, and maybe if you're a fellow developer in your company, he can easily identify what kind of variable that is. This is a variable for our files path. The default value, well, that will be the address that we just copied here. It will be a string because this is just text. The external name, that is files path. Then we'll have description, a string variable containing our path, like this, and then we can click create. Now we can use this variable, the files path. So open up the get files in folder, and instead of this hard-coded address, you just click here and choose the files path. So this one will take the variable files path, look, hey, what value is in here? The value we defined over here, and then we'll just use it here in the folder. So the result will be the same. However, we can easily change this variable here, the value of it, if the path changes. Let's try to run it. By the way, if you like this video, you can help me enormously by giving it a thumbs up, and if you have time, a small comment like hey or useful or whatever. Or if you have any questions, just post them below. So now you can see that it worked exactly like we did before. We click OK here. And we have our filter, so we only get the text files. Now we want to create a folder on our desktop because we want to clean up here in this mess. So we want to create a folder that's like right-clicking, clicking new, and a folder. But we want to have Power Automate Desktop doing so. So go back to our Flow Designer. So we will search for a create folder. We can either search actions up here, or we can click folder and find it here. Create folder. Create new folder into. Well, it's clever because now we can just type in files path because we'll know that we will create a new folder on our desktop. So we could either type in it ourselves, files path. Remember the person sign that tells Power Automate that it is a variable, or we could have clicked over here in the functions. So what will our new name be? Well, that could just be cleanup. That's where our file will go, like this. And then we could, so now we have created the folder, we can run it. We do nothing here, but we can go down to our desktop. Let me drag it in, and we can see that we have a cleanup folder now. It's empty, but we want to move the files to the cleanup folder. So let's see how that is done. So we choose a copy files first. So go to your file. The intuition with copy and move, that's the same. So I'll be showing both, but you really don't have to understand one of them, then you'll get the other one. So the files to copy, let's just copy the text files from up here on our list. That's easy because that list is stored into the name files. So again, we can click here and choose the files. This one will give us the text files. Remember, we had the filter here. The destination folder. Well, we just created a folder and we can refer to that quite easily. We can just click the function here and we can see that we have created a new flow variable called new folder. That's the variable from here. I will show you how it's created in a few seconds. So double click here. We can choose if the file exists, we do nothing, or we can overwrite. Let's just do nothing and click save. Because if we open the create folder, we can see that we have created the variable here, new folder. That's it. So now let's try to run the flow and verify that we indeed can copy the text files over. Let me disable the display message because we don't want that pop up every time we run our flow. We can see that it gets faded. So run. Like this. We go to our folder cleanup, and now we can see that we have copied our text documents over. So far so good. What we want to do now is to move the files instead. So let me delete this selection. We move the files instead. So what files do we want to move? We want to move still the files from up here. So choose them here in the variables, files. The destination folder, again, that was the new folder, so click here, new folder. If the file exists, let's just choose to override them. So now we are moving them instead of copying them. And as you can see, the intuition is exactly the same. There's nothing strange about that. And if you are not even an experienced Windows user, if you're just a normal Windows user, this will come easy to you. So let us go down to the cleanup folder, and we can see that we have moved it. They are gone from the desktop. Again, we can choose to expand our filter. So right now it's only the text files. We could choose to also have the PowerPoints and the Excels. And what we can do here is that we can have a semicolon, and then we can have our new filter. That one will be asterisk, meaning that we will take all Excel names, then the dot, XLSX, that's the Excel ending. Then another semicolon to specify that we want another filter. Again, we will take all names, then dot, PPT, that's PowerPoint. So what we do now here is we get these files in a folder that is either text documents, XLSX, Excel files, or PowerPoints, and store them into a list. And we will only look at the desktop because that's the file path. Remember, that was our path over here. And we choose not to include subfolders. But if you want, you just take this one. Then I click Save. Now we click Run, like this. We can see that my desktop is nicely cleaned now, and we have moved them over here. So far, so good. Now what we want to do is that I want to disable this Move Files and the Create folder. So we'll just click the three dots here, disable. And you can see now that we now produce an error, because now we are referring to a new folder variable here in the Move Files, and Power Automate automatically and correctly so says that this variable doesn't exist because we haven't created it. But when we disable this as well, we won't have any more error. So now we will have an empty folder. Let's say that I just want to delete these files again. We can just choose the empty folder here. What folder do we want to empty? Well, now we have deleted the new folder variable. So what we want to do is that we want to have the path for the desktop, and then we will have the cleanup afterwards. So what we can do is that we can use the files path. And this one is a good example of how we can combine variables. Then we'll have a backward slash and we will say cleanup. So this folder will now get emptied. Then click Run. Like this, we can go to our cleanup and we can see that it is indeed completely empty. Fine. Go back. Now let's say that we also want to delete it after we emptied it. So we can drag in a delete folder. Again, we will choose the files path, backward slash, cleanup. Like this, we can run the flow again. Power Automate will run, and now we will delete our folder. We can see that it's completely gone here on my desktop. That's fine. By the way, if you want more Power Automate desktop, then click the video in the upper right corner, which will take you to the complete playlist with Power Automate desktop tutorials. Now it's time to create an error by purpose. So if we run this again, well, what will happen? And let's talk about that. We will still get the files here. However, when we try to empty the folder, this folder will not exist, so this should create an error. Let's try to run it. This one delete folder, that will also have created an error, but the flow stopped here. So what we can do here is that we can double click it, and then we can see on error. Here we can say that we want to throw an error, or we will just continue the flow, and then we'll go to the next action here. Let's click Save. We will choose that in the delete folder as well. So now you learned some exception handling. We can see here that we will continue the flow again here. And we can try to run it to verify that we indeed can run our flow. So what we did now was that we specified that we want to try to empty the folder and delete the folder if they exist. And if they don't exist, we will do nothing. You'll see Now it worked. We can also rename a folder quite easily. Let me delete these two empty folders and delete folders like this. And let's create a folder. So drag in and create folder. Where do we want to create a folder? Well, that will still be on our desktop. So the files path here. What will our new folder be named? I'll just say example. And we will produce the variable new folder. That's fine. We can create a new folder. Let's see how that works. We did this before. Boom. We can minimize this and we can see that we have an example folder here. Now let's rename that folder. So what you do here is that you'll just drag in the rename folder. The folder to rename, well, we will use the variable to refer to this folder created up here. So click the FX and that was the new folder. So what will we rename it to? We can just say example2. Save and we can run it. Boom, we go to our desktop and we can see that we have indeed renamed our folder. Now let me just manually create a new folder here. I'll just call this cleanup again, like this. Because now we want to copy this folder into this cleanup folder. So copy folder, drag that in. The folder to copy. Well, the folder to copy, that was our example2. So we can say the file's path / and then example2. Where do we want to copy this folder to? That's the destination folder. Well, that will be files path again and / cleanup. We will click OK. Then we will click run. Boom. We now ran the flow. Let's verify that we have a cleanup folder here with the example2 in. That's good. So far so good. However, we might notice that we now have two examples. We have example and example2. What went wrong here? We go down to our flow again. Let me maybe drag it a little bit out here. What happened here is that we created the new example here in this flow. That's this one here. And then we tried to rename it, but there was already a folder called example2. So this one didn't do anything. Try to overwrite. And then we'll copy the folder. So that's why we have a new example folder here. Let me delete these two again. It's fine. We'll drag it in. Similarly, let's have the move folder. And the before mentioned, like this error, is always something that's good. Hey, what went wrong here? What could be? Why did this happen? It's always nice to think a little bit about that. You'll get a better RPA developer by doing so. That's called logic, not to talk down to you. The folder to move, that will be our example2. So what we'll do here is that we'll say files path here, /, then we can say example2. Sorry, that was my caps lock. Example2. Where do we want to move it to? That's the files path cleanup. Again, this one will teach you to work with file names and combining variables with strings. So now we click save here. So now we move this folder. Let me just delete this copy one here. We can run it. And then we get an error. Well, the error that we got here is that because it was locked from Power Automate, so sometimes it will be a little bit challenging to work with. So what you can do here is to move all other folders that the one that you just work with here, especially if it's about moving. You can of course also copy it like before, but it was locked from moving. So that's why. But otherwise it will work. A final thing, nice cool trick I will share with you is the get special folder. So let me delete these move folders here. We will choose the rename folder as well to delete and the create folder. Because if we want to get the path of special folders on a user's computer, that could be program files, pictures or whatever, then we can get that folder very easily. So go to folder, then choose the get special folder, drag it in here in front of the get files and folder. So here I want to get the desktop. Right now on the computer, we can see that that is indeed this address. That's fine. We can click save. So now we stored this address into the special folder path. So if we move this flow to another user, then this will change because, let me open this again, the other user won't be named Anders Jensen. Then we can go in here, get files in folders. And instead of the files path, we can now choose the special folder path here. Then we can click save. And the display message, we can enable that again, like this. So we click run, and right now the pop-up should be empty. Remember, we have no text, XLS, and PowerPoint on our desktop. We can verify that, and then we can try to create a file to, you see it's empty now. Let me minimize this and just create a new Excel file and run the flow again. Like this, and we have indeed identified our Excel sheet. Do you want more Power Automate? Then subscribe to the channel by clicking the icon in the middle. If you want more Power Automate desktop tutorials, click the icon on the left, and the right you will get a playlist with Power Automate Office flows. That's it. Bye bye.